Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon to those in Europe. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have this conversation. My name is Tara Andringa, and I'm the Executive Director of PAVE in North America. And as PAVE expands, we're looking forward to having a conversation about what a chapter in Europe looks like and how it will launch. Welcome our guests, Lukas Neckermann, the Managing Director of Neckermann Strategic Advisors. Thank you for joining us, Lukas.
And it's great to be here.
Thank you. And Karl Obermair, Dr. Karl Obermair from TÜV Rheinland. And I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Perfect pronunciation. Thank you very much. Proud to be here.
Great. So first, Lukas, I want to start with you. You were one of the two initial forces, along with Andreas Hermann at the University of St. Gallen, behind the idea of starting a chapter of PAVE in Europe. I'm curious to hear why you saw a need for this, what got you interested in starting this effort?
Start with the need, right? I've been pretty passionate about road safety for a very, very long time. And also seeing autonomous as a pathway towards greater road safety as well. So it's something that I've written a lot about. It's something that I've researched quite a bit, and our organization has done quite a lot of studies on the topic of autonomous and autonomous adoption. So we did a study in the UK in 2019 called Being Driven, which asked around 3,000 people on what the hurdles are towards acceptance and adoption of autonomous technology. In the UK, we found very, very similar results to what other studies in the US, but also across Europe, have found. And that's that the biggest hurdle is really public understanding, public trust in the autonomous technology. So we started listening around and started talking to a few key organizations in this field and said, hey, let's found an organization that helps build trust, helps build public understanding in autonomous technology. And quite quickly, actually, this email chain evolved into, let's create an organization like PAVE. And then we realized, why should we create an organization like PAVE when creating a European chapter of PAVE really makes a lot of sense? And aligning with the values, aligning with the spirit and the activities of PAVE in North America made more and more sense. So, it came from a desire really to help promote and communicate autonomous technology towards a wider public. And there it just made perfect sense then to turn that into a chapter of PAVE.
Great, that's fantastic. And then Karl, you were one of the first, if not the very first company to get involved with PAVE. And I'm curious, from your organization's perspective, why do you think public education is so important? How is that helpful to your work?
Yes, we were number one, so to say. The idea is very simple. So we are a player in the so-called TIC industry. So you have to understand that we are testing, inspecting, and certifying things against reference, like legal reference, rules, regulation standards, or things like that. And we are an independent third-party player. So normally we do a very independent job. And if something is TÜV proven or TÜV certified, it's like a quality brand. In many parts of the world, we are an international organization. And I once was asked by a journalist, said, that's so complicated what you're doing as TÜV Rheinland. What is your product? What is essentially your service? And I thought it over and I said to him, our product is trust. So in fact, we are producing trust. So if something is TÜV certified or TÜV proven or TÜV tested, it simply means for the public, you can trust this technology, which in itself could be doubted. And that is exactly the point with autonomous driving vehicles. Mm-hmm. We know by many, many studies that on the one hand, there is a lot of technology inside, and it could help us with road safety targets, of course. But on the other side, from the consumer's perspective, we see that there is trust missing. The people do not trust in this technology. And so it was very easy for us to say, listen, we as an industry player, which produces trust, and we see that here is a very relevant technological development, which is lacking trust. So we have to do something. So that's where Lukas and Andreas from St. Gallen, we came at the same point in time together. And by coincidence, we just made a study together at the University of St. Gallen about trust. You know, we are all technological players or strategic consultants, but you wouldn't imagine that a technological player like TÜV Rheinland is doing a study on trust. How is trust generated? How is trust perceived? What is necessary to raise trust? And we realized that this is much, much more important than the simple technology or legal topics or liability topics or things like that. And that's what the reason why we said we have to do something together. And this was the initiative.
Great. And, you know, and that's exactly why PAVE was started, is to raise the level of education and trust. And Lukas, I'm curious, you know, some people may ask why not just one PAVE, why there's a need for a separate chapter in Europe. And I'm curious from your perspective, what are the unique things or the unique challenges in Europe? Why is there an advantage to having a separate chapter there?
Of course, there is surely a lot of overlap and a lot of ways, Tara, that certainly the European chapter will align and coordinate with other chapters as well, including, of course, in North America. But the European reality around autonomous vehicles may be slightly different than the American one. Let's just consider the types of vehicles. The types of vehicles that are being tested on the streets or even implemented on the streets. We're more likely to see shuttles in Europe. So you have the likes of one of the other founding members of PAVE Europe, Easy Mile, but there are others as well, such as Navia, who's been operating for quite a while across Europe. And recently as well, there have been other announcements that have been made, even ZF recently making an announcement. And there are probably 5 or 10 others as well. Oxbotica and Arrigo come to mind that are more shuttle or public transport based autonomous implementations. And that's perhaps simply because of the nature of the European kind of road environment, if you will. You'll see a lot more public transport than you do in the US. So the implementation is different. We've also got logistics, a lot of logistics that is moving in this direction, and perhaps a little bit more on the last mile than on the longer distances. So we have even some grocery stores doing deliveries autonomously in the UK and other test beds across Europe as well. So while we have a lot of overlap and a lot of commonality, the reality and frankly also the roads are different in Europe, and that means that we have a different set of needs, if you will. Add on top of that, of course, we have the linguistic and the regulatory differences that come along with, well, you know, a complex web of different countries and legal frameworks.
Let me add a point, if I may, Tara. Is this okay? Let me add a point to what Lukas said. I think it is also, let's say, a difficult type of game which is played, or a different type of market which we talk about. Let me say it in a very simplistic way. I see 3 key markets in the world for autonomous driving vehicles. Let's say it's the US, of course, it's China, let's say, and it's Europe, to be very, very unspecific on that. And if you look at these 3 markets, which are really advanced in different elements of autonomous driving solutions, you see that, for example, the US approach is more of a style like as less regulation as possible and as much market as necessary and as much market as possible. So in a very easy word, The Chinese game is a completely different one, with industry politics, with defending interests, with a complete different mindset regarding data protection, for example. So this is the same technology, but a different framework. And if you look from that point of view to Europe, there is, it's not so much a question of product liability. You know, if in the States, you bring a new technology, product liability is a very, very strong topic in the US. The European way is a little different. It says we have to test the things before they come to a market. And we do this by using independent third-party testing houses. So it's not a question of your money. It's not a question of capital. It's not a question that you can pay if an accident happens. It's a question if we allow that this solution is implemented. It's a hybrid between regulation and market. And so it's not so aggressive in a way like the American approach, and not so progressive as the American approach. I do not want to judge that three things now, but I think there are three different markets with three different characteristics. And there could be something like a European road to autonomy, which is in about many instances comparable to the American way, but on some very specific points, it's completely different. And regulation, for example, and the approval of solutions, the industry I'm in, is very, very difficult and very, very different to solutions in other markets.
You know, and I'm curious in terms, you talk about the different approach to testing. Kind of what is the status of AVs in Europe right now? Like how frequently do you see autonomous vehicles on the streets? Like what is how would you describe the landscape right now?
It is, you have to really differentiate between let's say the mass markets, like private cars or something like that. Of course, you see level 2, level 3 coming already on the markets. You see a lot of testing cars on that. You see, as Lukas said, in terms of public transport or freight transport, you see a lot of cargo mover, people mover solutions driving around smaller cities. They are already advanced, not in a testing mode, but already doing their services in some very progressive cities all over Europe. So you see a lot of testing, you see a lot of discussion about it, and you see especially with regard to public transport, and this is, Lukas is absolutely right, this is one of the differentiators, that we are mainly now talking about people mover systems, on-demand shuttles, on-demand car taxi solutions. Of course, we also have the private car, but the public transport is at the moment, I would say, even the same level of activity than you see in the private car. So there is a lot of development, but I guess that in a technological point of view, I think the US market is still leading.
You know, Lukas, we talked a little bit about the difference in regulation and public sector involvement. One of the things PAVE obviously tries to do is to bring all kinds of stakeholders together. And in the US, we have a public sector advisory council where we interact with, you know, entities on the public side. What kind of engagement do you see in Europe with the public sector?
Perhaps not entirely dissimilar to the US, where you have 50 different frameworks. In Europe, yes, exactly. We do also have different member states of the EU, but also non-member states of the EU across the geographic Europe, let's say. So that are creating regulatory frameworks, but also incentive frameworks. You know, countries that are investing into autonomous. Just here in the UK, where I'm based, recently there was Innovate UK had handed out some research and development funds to a group of autonomous development companies, and that's pretty exciting. And we see similar things happening across each of the member states. But on top of that, yes, of course, you have the European Commission, which has a coordinating role. It has a regulatory role to play in this. There's many so-called DGs of the European Commission who are involved in autonomous, whether it's on the research and development side or on the regulatory side. And I think it's pretty important to find ways to work together with this body, and we intend to as well, because quite simply, it has a significant voice. It has a significant voice across at least the member states of the EU.
Absolutely. And Karl, another thing I'm curious to hear from you is we always say that PAVE, and I know Lukas and I have talked about this endlessly, it's a member-led organization. What our members are the people on the ground who know this industry better than anyone. What are the things you would like to see out of PAVE? Like, what are your hopes and priorities for PAVE Europe?
Let me put it in an example or in a metaphor, there are organizations, for example, like VDA in Germany, where all the German car manufacturers talk with each other, work together on regulation topics, on engine, on environmental topics. It's like an umbrella where automotive topics are discussed. Mm-hmm. For me, that's a little bit, let's say, the old industry, Mm-hmm. And I compare it to the telephone industry, let's say 10, 15 years ago. There were all these players producing telephones, mobile phones, like Nokia, Ericsson, all over in Europe, and so on. And then there came something up like a new technology called smartphone. And of course it is something like a phone, but in a way it's a different thing. It's the same thing in a way, and it's a different thing in another way. And I really question it if the same organizations, the same institutions who talked about the future of the telephone in a classical sense are the ideal body to talk about the future of a smartphone. Mm-hmm. Maybe there are some linkages between these topics. I'm sure there are, but you have to see that this is something very new, something very specific. So from my point of view, I would be happy to have players like Volkswagen on board in PAVE Europe, or Renault or Fiat or whatever. But if you have a manufacturer like EasyMile, mm-hmm. Which is something like a first very agile smartphone OEM on board, that's very typical. So I see that there is an industry really reshaping at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I would love to see that that we do not look on the new things with the eyes of the old world, but we look on the new things to see that this is a really huge and big opportunity. Of course, there are similarities to solutions we had in the past, but there is so much potential and so much positive as well as negative potential in these things. Autonomous driving cars, they are not the solution of all of our road safety or environmental topics. They have a lot of problems in itself also, which have to be solved and discussed. But first we have to look at this as something new, and it makes sense to have also new players on the table. So an umbrella organization of smartphone could not only consist of OEMs, but also startups, software developers, AI developers, many other interesting players. And this is a much broader circle. And I would love to see PAVE Europe to be something like the platform which has a new perspective on this technology, which is significantly different from the way in which we looked at the car 10 years or 20 years ago.
I think that's an excellent point. And I want to build on that a little bit, Lukas. So this is a new technology that we're trying to educate the public about or introduce to the public. And part of the challenge is that there are a lot of misconceptions. There's some bad information out there, a lot of false hype. What are some of the most common misperceptions or confusion that you see among the European public that you feel like PAVE really needs to address there?
Mm-hmm. So surely in Europe, just as in the US, there is some there are some misunderstandings in terms of what actual self-driving means, in particular when we have certain terms that perhaps not everyone can associate with a certain level of autonomy. If you have full self-driving or self-driving or these things, that's makes it sometimes a little bit difficult to differentiate between an L2 system and an L4 system. We have that in Europe just the same way. To make it very blunt and simple, these are systems with a steering wheel or systems without a steering wheel, so to speak. But there are additional elements as well, and that probably has a little bit more to do with the complexity of our roads. We have a lot of roundabouts, so there's going to be some skepticism. Hey, are they going to be able to master in the UK? There's something called a magic roundabout, which is in fact a roundabout is one of these things where without traffic lights, where you drive around in a circle to get to your exit. And there's one which has 5 roundabouts within a roundabout, so it makes it a very, very complex challenge. And how does an autonomous vehicle master that, or how does it master the Scandinavian winters? We of course know there's a autonomous developer in Finland that is focused specifically, Sensible 4, focused specifically on driving around on ice patches and things like that. So the European road environment is different, and it causes a certain skepticism. People will say, well, yes, look, an autonomous car can master, a highway in the US or a simple street in Nevada, but can it really master, the complexities of the German Autobahn or the Magic Roundabout? No. So there's a bit of skepticism around that, and it's very much linked to our road environment. And that's where we're really, really thrilled to have such a diversity of interest coming from different organizations, and also our confirmed founding members, starting of course with TÜV Rheinland. Karl spoke about trust, and it's so important, and we're really thrilled to have TÜV Rheinland be one of the founding members of PAVE Europe, along with Easy Mile we've mentioned, but also Intel Mobileye and Swiss Re as well. And you can see there, these are all organizations that, while there is a link to the classic auto industry, a lot of them are completely separated from the classic auto industry. And it shows that PAVE's umbrella is much larger, right? We span insurance, we span suppliers into the autonomous industry, we span OEMs, but we will also have operators and mass aggregators at some point as well that will be members. And then again, the financial service and the testing part also is are such important elements of making it happen, making it a reality. And that's why, as Karl said, our umbrella is just a bit larger than quote unquote just automotive.
I was going to get to this a little later, but I'll actually have you say it now. What does it mean to be a founding member, Lukas, of PAVE Europe?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the founding members will give the initial direction to the organization. The organization is currently soliciting founding members until roughly the end of October, and at that point we will submit all of the planning details and paperwork in order to create this not-for-profit organization in Brussels. The founding members will be the initial members of the board of PAVE Europe, and will appoint a director. They will give direction, sign off on the bylaws of PAVE Europe. So they basically are creating the organization for the future, and they will guide the organization going forward as well. So we place a lot of trust in the founding members, And we are thrilled, as I mentioned, to have such a wide variety of founding members on board.
And Karl, you touched on this earlier, but just to kind of phrase it a different way, TÜV obviously is one of the significant founding members. There are a lot of AV coalitions out there that you could choose between. Why PAVE? Why? What made you?
Can you repeat the question? Why PAVE?
I mean, there are a lot of coalitions out there focused on AV.
Oh, okay, coalitions. Okay.
Yes. What made you choose PAVE among the options?
PAVE has an excellent image and an excellent reputation. So this is it is a very interesting organization, very dynamic. We saw it from a European perspective, very interesting members, very member driven. Exactly the platform that we are lacking of, we are needing here in Europe. With a different, of course, European touch, as discussed already. So it is for us an ideal constellation to do it in the way we did it. And let me give you just another food for thought on the misunderstanding topic. You know, you could also put it the other way around. You know, the consumer and the markets are always right. You know, there is nothing like a misunderstanding. So you could also put it the other way around. A consumer is skeptic about this technology, and you know that's an evolutionary thing to be skeptical about new things and innovation. People have learned over millions and millions of years that if there is a new thing, it's clever to be skeptic at the beginning. And another point with misunderstanding: if you call your product an autopilot, you know, it's not a misunderstanding if a consumer thinks that this thing can drive itself. Yeah? So there are many different dimensions of misunderstanding. So my point is, it is our role to really understand the people. And I strongly believe that trust is not only a question of information and studies and data and evidence. So, for example, if I have a kid and this kid has doubts to go into the cellar in the evening because it has a bad feeling there, you know, it doesn't help to tell statistics about crimes in cellars or in the darkness. It doesn't help. So trust is something which is much more complex. We have to provide information. We have to provide studies. We have to do discussion and dialogues. We have to be very honest if something doesn't work. But, you know, I'm convinced that my calculator machine or my Excel software can do calculations better than I can do on a piece of paper. But I have to learn that these systems work better than my brain works. Yeah. And this is not self-explaining. So this is something that also needs time. So we have to be a little bit patient. This will not be a solution within the next weeks to come or months to come. This will be a process. And there is also, on the other side of the trust, we also have to manage expectations. You know, I wouldn't be happy if the people are full of trust in these new technologies, even if there is room for skepticism on it, on a technological point of view, on a data protection point of view, on many dimensions. So it has to be the right level of trust against the technology. And this level will change over the next years. But at the moment, we have a big imbalance of these two things. What is it, and how much could you trust in it?
I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, one of my favorite quotes that I've heard through all my time at PAVE is Chris Armstrong, who's the founder of Aurora, which is another PAVE member. I heard someone ask him once, how do you build trust? And his answer was, we have to earn it, which is exactly right. Lukas, want to give you the last word. If an organization wants to become involved in PAVE Europe, what do they do? How do they get involved?
Quite simply, reach out. Reach out to Karl, reach out to me, reach out to Frederick, who's on my team and as helping build this coalition. We'd like to hear from potential founding members, but we also already want to hear from regular members and academic members. And we want to hear from the public sector as well, because each one of these are going to be important elements of the puzzle, if you will. Right? Everyone has a story to tell. Karl is absolutely right. You know, we have all these amazing statistics, these research studies, and, you know, disengagement rates and all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's about the stories we tell. The stories that we tell to highlight the benefits of autonomous technology. That's what it will come down to. It's not, you know, people aren't sold on 97 or 98% or 1,000,000 miles or 2,000,000 miles or whatever else. People are sold when this is you know, a benefit to their health, a benefit to their safety, a benefit to the efficiency of an organization, of a company, of the infrastructure. And those are the stories we want to tell, and we want to allow the member organizations as well to tell their stories. So we think it's a compelling case. It's an exciting time, and we want to onboard members as soon as possible.
Fantastic. And sadly, with that, we're out of time. But thank you, Lukas Neckermann and Dr. Karl Obermair, for joining us today. And we at PAVE in North America could not be more excited to be working with you to expand our mission to Europe. Thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.